Welcome. You're listening to the 365 Firsts podcast, a show filled with stories of experiencing first times and all the fun, growth, unknowns, and excitement that go with them. It's also the place to get expert advice, motivation, and inspiration to get in on trying new things. And now, here's your host, the master of first times, and chick you're trying to keep up with, Ann Bernard.
Lee's mission is to encourage and equip parents to homeschool all the way through high school. Her practical advice and organized presentations have helped thousands of homeschool parents muster up the courage to complete their homeschooling journey. Both reassuring and empowering, Lee gives you the knowledge you need to successfully graduate your high school student. Welcome to the show, Lee.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ann. I'm glad to be here. I personally started homeschooling on 9/11. And that's when my children started high school and started middle school. I've been homeschooling since the first school shooting, but our first day of middle school and high school was on 9/11. And so when I look at how panicky and fearful people are, I always remember my own experience of thinking, oh, today's the day I'm going to homeschool, but we couldn't because it was 9/11 and how we had to take some time off and before we got started.
What were your initial challenges once you decided to go ahead and homeschool your two boys?
Oh, well, I had actually had my kids in elementary school for public school until they were in 3rd and 5th grade. And so I kind of saw what went on there and how they didn't finish the books in the year and they weren't providing for my children's academic needs and some of the bullying that took place. And so when I started, it was because I recognized the weaknesses of public education to provide for the exact needs of my child. And that's when I started to look at homeschooling as a solution to giving your child exactly what they needed. And of course, in this situation, it's portable. You know, you can take it anywhere, even when you're secluded in your home. People are basically kicked out of the public school and they're freaking like they have to start homeschooling. And I just don't think that's the case. I think we can all take a collective breath and focus on the mental health of our children.
What advice and guidance do you have for them on how to approach this?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the best advice is to know that you are in the best position to help your child, because schools, they care deeply about children, but you love your child. And that's what makes you successful. You're much more involved and invested in whether or not your child can read yet, can write well, finish their math. We care about whether they ultimately get a good job, whether they get into college and get scholarships. You know, we're emotionally and physically and financially invested in their success. And so that is why homeschooling works. It's because we love our children.
I don't know how to teach. Like, I'm not a teacher and I don't know how to teach. How do they get over that mindset?
Okay, good. Yeah. So teachers go to college to learn how to teach groups of kids. Okay. We don't have to teach groups of kids. We only have the one kid. Okay. So we don't need to know the crowd control, the homework, the classroom. How do you keep them in line? How do you hush them up? How do you grade 20 people? Even grading is a good example when you're thinking about making homeschool grades. You don't even have to use tests. A test tells a teacher what this one kid out of 30 knows and has done. But when we're evaluating, we're actually looking at the child. We don't have to test whether they read the book. We see them read the book. We don't have to test whether they did their homework or finished their art project. We see them doing their homework and doing their art project. And so the skill set is completely different. Literally in each hour, only 20 minutes of it is attended to education. And so if you get 20 good minutes in an hour, you win. This is what their children do, regardless of how much education the parent has. Whether the parent has a high school diploma or a master's or doctorate degree, the results are the same. regardless of the race of the student, which I know is so frustrating for many parents of minorities. They get frustrated with the different expectations that are held for their children. Well, homeschooling has this positive statistical result regardless of race.
So what are some things that they do need to make sure that they're doing?
Okay, well, good question. Well, so if you're really thinking about homeschooling, then the first thing is to look up your state homeschool law. And then recognize that whatever the public school law says, you don't necessarily have to follow that. Instead, you can decide what works for your family and use the curriculum and the methods that fit your child. Kids have this learning style. They're visual learners, or they're auditory learners, or they're hands-on learners. And as a public schooler, you have no control over what they use. It's all textbook, which only meets the visual learner. But when you're homeschooling, you get to choose the method that fits your child. But when you're choosing curriculum for homeschooling, it assumes you know nothing, okay? So it's written to a parent and student who know nothing. And that's how, in my homeschool, I was able to get my kids 3 years of Latin, 3 years of French, physics, calculus, and I do not know those subjects myself.
So how do you start the day?
Okay, good question. So what we did in our homeschool is to have a morning meeting. Because I was not the teacher, you know, we were talking about that. Your role changes from caretaker when you have a baby, and then you're the teacher when they're in early elementary years. But then in high school, you become this mentor to them. You're a project manager. You're not. My husband worked for Boeing, so he wasn't the one that built the airplane. He was the project manager that told people to build the airplane. And that's what it's like to homeschool. And so what you do is you become the project manager by having a morning meeting. And in this morning meeting, you check in with each of your children. You make sure that you touch base with most subjects. You can review any problem areas. You can explain any assignments. You can review what you expect them to do that day, what appointments you have that day. One thing that I found extremely helpful is to spend part of the morning meeting on vocabulary. But I do find it extremely helpful to put your weak areas first. So if your child's weak area is math, wouldn't we like to just postpone that until, 5 o'clock, and then it's dinner time. We don't have to do it. It's dinner time, So you put your weakest area first, and you put it first with your time. First thing that you do each day, priority every day, never miss a day. But it's also the first thing you do with your money. So that's where you put your curriculum dollars first.
Do the parents need to feel the pressure of, I need to make sure that they're studying for this amount of time and they're doing that? Or because as a project manager, or it would be, here's your project, here's what you have to do. Once you're done, you're done. If it takes you an hour, it takes you an hour. If it takes you 5, it takes you 5, it takes you 10, it takes you 10.
That's right.
So that's the approach.
Yeah. So my expertise is in helping parents homeschool the high school years. So I talk a lot about grades and credits and how do you make sure that they're legitimate grades and legitimate credits at the high school level. And when you're talking about high school, then you measure credits based on the project. Did you finish the math book? Or did you put in the time? Okay. And so if you're spending about an hour a day and your child is doing art or PE or home ec, right? Any of those things, if they're spending about an hour a day, that's going to be a high school credit. They put in the time. There is no book for PE. There is no test for PE. It's just, did they put in the time, right? One thing to remember, though, is that there's a difference between socializing for a couple of hours a week or whatever versus being thrown into the deep end and having kids, their entire personality shaped and molded by 4th grade boys. You kind of don't want that. You kind of want the kids to be socialized, to be respectful to all people and kind to everyone. And these are not necessarily true of groups of 14-year-old boys or whatever. And so the socialization at home can actually be quite a relief. After children come home, they can then become more socialized like adults are within the context of their family.
Did you get feedback from your boys after they got to college and what they started observing in college?
Yes, yes. And so that's kind of interesting. So when they first got to college, their initial response, I think, was pretty much shock because they were emotionally and socially prepared. They were shocked by the academics, that it was so that they did not know that homeschooling was going to be harder than what they were doing at college. They did not know that at the university level that I graded the same way their university professors did, demanding that it get done, demanding that they fix it before turning it in again, and that's how colleges work. They use Socratic dialogue and, tell me what you've learned. Well, that's our homeschool in a nutshell. Mm-hmm.
What are your recommendation on, especially kids who are not used to being homeschooled, parents are not used to homeschooling them, and now they get into this environment where home has been the place where they have had access to do whatever they want, and now they can't. So what's the guidance there?
Yeah, that's really challenging, because when parents hear about schools, a lot of times what they hear is we need more technology, we have to have technology in every classroom, everybody needs a computer, etc. The research actually shows that education takes place better without technology, and that computers and technology are more distracting than they are helpful for education. My usual recommendation then is you use a technology-based curriculum when you have to.
Now, what if someone is looking like, okay, they do have their child's curriculum, it's not set up for them to teach it, so they do want to shift a homeschool curriculum. How would they proceed to doing that?
Oh, that's a good question. So with curriculum, I do have a book on Amazon called Choosing Curriculum That's Effective and Fun by Lee Binz. But again, it basically boils down to choosing a curriculum that was made for homeschoolers by homeschoolers, because it assumes that you know nothing. It is written for you. It knows that you're at home. It teaches in a more natural way. You don't have to have a script that you read off, or a video of a classroom with chairs in it. You don't have to have any of that.
So it sounds like then a good place to start is to sit down with your child, and if you can still reach out to their teachers, understanding what they were learning, what they're expected to know at the end of the school year, just becoming a good learner sets you up for success in life.
It does, in anything, whether you go to college or not. We all learn something in our jobs, whether that's at home or in the job.
When you do get to high school, and from high school preparing for your child to be able to apply for college and be selected, qualify and be selected, what's the process for that?
Oh, great. Well, that's what I help people with all day long, is help homeschoolers get ready for college, and then get into college, and hopefully get scholarships. And I think for parent to parent, it really boils down to taking some continuing education classes yourself, so that you're knowledgeable about your job as a home educator. One homeschool trick is to always teach the government and economics during an election year, when everybody's talking about government and economics. So I just wanted to encourage people one more time to remember that at this moment in time, just focus on the physical needs of your kids. You hug them. Focus on the spiritual needs of your family and break out the Bible. Focus on the emotional needs of your family by turning off that emotional overload. Turn off the TV and social media. Maybe limit it to one news program with your kids each day so they don't get overwhelmed. The occupational skills, you can focus on home ec, loading the dishwasher, baking bread, and then socializing within the family as you can.
What are the ways that people can get in touch with you?
Oh, okay. So my website is homehighschoolhelp.com, and I am on Facebook a lot, the HomeScholar, and I'm also on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube.
All right, Lee, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on. I really learned a lot.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me, Ann. I just wanted to point out to people before I go, just remember you're not required to homeschool by anyone. This has affected the whole country, the whole world, and just focus on crisis management, focus on creating your family values, and when the dust settles, then you can make a decision that's best for your family.
Beautiful parting words. Thank you.
You've been listening to the 365 Firsts podcast. Hope you've got inspired to start your journey of first times and new experiences. Join the 365 Firsts Challenge by downloading the app at your local app store. Check out Next Level Firsts Coaching for additional assistance. Contact us if you want to share the stories of your latest firsts on the show. Now, go get busy having new experiences.